Michael Reeves stood at his office window on the 40th floor of Chicago's premier financial district, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Lake Michigan. At 53, he had achieved everything society deemed worthy of respect: senior partner at Morton & Blake Investment Management, a sprawling lakefront home in Highland Park, and a family that looked perfect in their annual Christmas cards. Yet as he loosened his Italian silk tie, the weight in his chest grew heavier. The text message from his wife Catherine still burned on his phone screen: "Working late again. Don't wait up." It was the third time this week, and something about the periods between those words felt like tiny bullets. "Mr. Reeves?" His assistant Sarah's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "The quarterly reports you requested." She placed a stack of folders on his desk, hesitating slightly. "And, there's something else." The IT department flagged some unusual activity on Mrs. Reeves' company credit card. Michael's jaw tightened. Catherine had insisted on keeping her position as the firm's head of client relations after their marriage 25 years ago. He'd supported her decision, proud of her independence. Now, that independence felt like a double-edged sword. "Thank you, Sarah. You can go home." He waited until the door clicked shut before opening his laptop. The credit card statements revealed a pattern: dinner reservations at intimate restaurants he'd never visited, charges at boutique hotels, all during those late nights at the office. His phone buzzed, a text from his oldest friend in the firm's security chief, David Chen: "Need to talk. Important. Usual place, 30 minutes. The Drake Hotel's bar was their sanctuary for 20 years of friendship. David was already nursing a scotch when Michael arrived, his usually composed face marked with concern. "You should sit down for this, Mike." David pulled out an envelope. "Catherine's been meeting someone. Another partner at the firm. I wouldn't have gotten involved, but..." He slid over several photographs. "It's Marcus Sterling." Michael's blood ran cold. Marcus Sterling, the rising star he'd personally mentored, the man he'd trusted with their biggest accounts, who'd spent countless Sunday afternoons by their pool, teaching Michael's teenage son James how to perfect his tennis serve. "How long?" Michael's voice was barely audible. 6 months, at least." David's eyes held a mixture of sympathy and something darker. "But there's more. They've been moving money. Large amounts. And not just their own." The implications hit Michael like a physical blow. As senior partner, he was ultimately responsible for all client accounts. If there was financial misconduct under his watch. "The SEC filing deadline is next week," David continued. "Whatever they're planning, it's coming to a head soon. You need to be careful, Mike. Sterling's got connections we don't know about. And Catherine, she knows everything about your finances, your clients, your life." Michael stared into his untouched whiskey, seeing the amber liquid blur as his mind raced. 25 years of marriage, of building a life together, of trust, had it all been a calculated move in some longer game? Had she ever loved him at all? His phone lit up with another text from Catherine. James called. "He's coming home this weekend. Wants to tell us something important." James. Their only child. The thought of his son's face, so open and trusting, made Michael's chest constrict. James idolized both his parents, and Marcus had become like a second father to him. How could he protect his son from the impending explosion? David's hand on his shoulder brought him back to the present. "You've got tough decisions to make, my friend. But whatever you do, remember, in this game, the person who moves first holds the advantage." As Michael stepped out into the Chicago night, the wind off the lake cut through his expensive suit like knives. He had 72 hours until James arrived home, and a week until the SEC filing. In that time, he needed to uncover the full scope of the betrayal, protect his son, and find a way to save not just his career, but potentially his freedom. The city sparkled around him, beautiful and treacherous, much like the life he thought he knew. As he hailed a cab, his phone buzzed one final time, an email from Marcus Sterling. "Mike, need your signature on some urgent documents tomorrow morning." Nothing major, just routine client account adjustments. Breakfast meeting. Michael's fingers hovered over the phone. In the glass towers above, thousands of lights winked like knowing eyes, and somewhere in one of those buildings, his wife was with the man who might destroy them all. He took a deep breath and typed his response, knowing that every word from now on could be either a weapon or a shield. The game was about to begin, and he couldn't afford to lose. Michael barely slept that night. The emptiness beside him in their king-sized bed felt like a void, mocking the life he'd built. When Catherine finally came home at 2 a.m., her designer perfume mixed with something else, something masculine and foreign, he kept his breathing steady, pretending to sleep. Each breath was an exercise in control, each moment of silence a battle against the urge to confront her. Dawn found him in his home office, methodically reviewing 25 years of financial records. The morning light crawled across family photos on the walls, holidays in Aspen, James's graduation, their 20th anniversary in Tuscany. In each image, Catherine's smile now seemed like a mask, hiding secrets he'd been too blind to see. His phone buzzed, Marcus confirming their breakfast meeting at the Palmer house. Michael adjusted his tie in the mirror, noting how his face had aged overnight. Heading to an early meeting, he called out to Catherine. She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her silk robe, her grace still breathtaking after all these years. "You okay, honey? You seem tense." Her concern sounded genuine, and that was perhaps the most terrifying part. How many morning conversations like this had been performances? Just a complicated merger. The lie tasted bitter. "Don't forget James is coming home tomorrow." Something flickered in her eyes at their son's name. Fear? Guilt? She stepped forward, adjusting his tie with familiar intimacy. "Of course. I'm looking forward to it." Her fingers lingered on his chest, and for a moment, Michael almost broke. Almost told her what he knew. Almost begged her to explain how they'd ended up here. Instead, he kissed her cheek and left, the ghost of her touch burning through his shirt. The Palmer House's restaurant was quiet at 7 a.m. Marcus stood as Michael approached, young and confident in his tailored suit. "Mike. Thanks for coming early." His handshake was firm, his smile easy. How many times had they shared breakfast here, planning strategies, celebrating victories? How long had Marcus been planning to destroy him? What couldn't wait until the office? Michael kept his voice neutral as he studied the man he'd thought of as a son. Marcus slid over a folder. "Just need your signature on these client transfer authorizations. The Preston account is moving some assets offshore, standard tax planning stuff." The Preston account. One of their oldest clients, worth over $300 million. Michael opened the folder, scanning documents that looked routine but set off alarm bells in his mind. "I'll need to review these more carefully." "Of course, but we need to file by end of day." Marcus's smile remained steady, but something hardened in his eyes. The clients are getting anxious about market volatility. Before Michael could respond, his phone lit up with a text from David, urgent. "Preston account compromised. Don't sign anything." Evidence on Catherine's laptop. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee. "Tell me, Marcus, how's Jennifer?" The mention of Marcus's wife caused a barely perceptible flinch. "Still teaching at Northwestern?" "She's good. Busy with her research." Marcus glanced at his watch. "About those documents. It must be hard, balancing a marriage with other commitments." Michael let the words hang between them. Late nights at the office, unexpected travel. The younger man's facade cracked for just a moment, showing a flash of something ugly underneath. "What exactly are you implying, Mike?" "Nothing yet." Michael stood, leaving the unsigned documents on the table. "But I think we both know this conversation isn't over." Back at the office, Michael found Sarah waiting with more disturbing news. Mrs. Reeves was asking about access to the secure client files this morning. And she hesitated, she was crying in her office earlier. A familiar ache bloomed in his chest. Even now, the thought of Catherine in pain affected him. But he couldn't afford sentiment. Not anymore. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. It's not strictly within protocol. By noon, Sarah had quietly copied the contents of Catherine's laptop. What Michael found made his world tilt on its axis. Hidden in encrypted folders were detailed plans, not just for embezzling client funds, but for framing him for the theft. Emails between Catherine and Marcus outlined their scheme, how they would manipulate records, create a paper trail leading to Michael, and then emerge as the whistleblowers who uncovered the fraud. But there was something else. Something that made his blood run cold. Among Catherine's files was a folder labeled James, Medical Records. Files that revealed a truth that shattered everything Michael thought he knew about his family. His phone rang. It was James. Dad? Can we talk? I'm actually flying in tonight instead of tomorrow. There's something I need to tell you and Mom, something I should have told you years ago. Michael stared at the medical records on his screen, then at a photo on his desk, James at age 12, the summer his eyes changed from brown to hazel, just like Marcus Sterling's eyes. Of course, son, he managed to say, his free hand gripping the desk until his knuckles turned white. We have a lot to talk about. The autumn wind whipped across O'Hare's terminals as Michael waited for James's flight. Each passing minute felt like an eternity, filled with memories he now questioned. James's first steps, his little league games, the camping trips where they'd talked about life under star-filled skies, had they all been built on lies? He spotted James through the crowd, tall, lean, with that familiar determined stride. But now Michael saw what he'd been blind to for 23 years, the slight curl of James's hair, the set of his jaw, all echoes of Marcus Sterling. The realization made his chest constrict. Dad! James's embrace was fierce, genuine. Whatever else was true, this love between them was real. James pulled back, studying Michael's face with concern. You look tired. Is everything okay? Michael forced a smile. Just work stress. How about we grab dinner, just us? Your mother's. He paused, the lie bitter on his tongue. She's tied up with client meetings. They ended up at Gibson's, their traditional father-son spot. James fidgeted with his water glass, reminding Michael of his teenage years. Dad, before we get home, there's something I need to tell you. I've been seeing a therapist in Boston. Michael's heart skipped. Are you okay? I'm getting there. James took a deep breath. Remember when I was 12, and I got really sick? The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong, and then suddenly I got better. The medical records from Catherine's laptop flashed through Michael's mind. I remember every minute of it. I found out why. James's voice cracked slightly. I needed a bone marrow transplant. Mom told me years later that you weren't a match, but they found one quickly. I never questioned it until I needed updated medical records for my residency application. Michael's hands trembled around his scotch glass. What did you find? The donor was Marcus Sterling. James's eyes, Marcus's eyes, filled with tears. At first, I thought it was just luck. But then I did the math, looked at old photos. I had genetic testing done last month. Dad! I know Marcus is my biological father. The restaurant's ambient noise faded to a distant hum. Michael saw his son, because regardless of DNA, James would always be his son, struggling with guilt and confusion that should never have been his burden. I've been so angry, James continued, his voice raw. Not at you, you've been the best father anyone could ask for. But at Mom, at Marcus. How could they let you raise me, love me, without ever telling the truth? I couldn't keep lying to you. Michael reached across the table, gripping James's hand. Listen to me. You have nothing to feel guilty about. You're my son. Nothing, not DNA, not their lies, changes that. There's more. James pulled out his phone, showing Michael an email. Marcus has been reaching out to me for months. Professional mentoring at first, then personal stuff. Last week, he told me everything, his relationship with Mom, their plans. He wants me to convince you to sign some documents about client accounts. Says it's to protect the family's reputation. The pieces clicked into place. Marcus and Catherine hadn't counted on James's integrity, his deep bond with Michael. They'd tried to use James as a pawn, not realizing they'd created their own downfall. James, what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change everything. Michael detailed the evidence he'd found, the elaborate scheme to frame him, the years of deception. With each revelation, he watched his son's face transition from shock to rage to a deep, determined calm. What are you going to do? James asked finally. What I have to. But first, I need you to understand something. Michael leaned forward, his voice intense. Every moment with you, every game, every conversation, every triumph and failure we shared, was real. Being your father is the greatest gift of my life. Nothing they did can take that away. James wiped his eyes. So what's the plan? They don't know that we know. Tomorrow, your mother's hosting that charity gala at the Art Institute. Half of Chicago's financial elite will be there. Marcus plans to have me sign those documents during the event. And then frame you when the SEC investigates, James finished. But we can stop them. Michael nodded slowly. We can. But it's going to be ugly. People we care about will be hurt. Are you sure you want to be involved? James straightened in his chair, and Michael saw something new in his expression, not just determination, but a deep, unwavering loyalty. They may have given me life, Dad, but you taught me how to live it. Whatever you need, I'm here. As they left the restaurant, Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Where are you? James just landed. Why aren't you answering? Another message followed from Marcus. Mike, we need those signatures first thing tomorrow. Don't make this difficult. Father and son shared a look under the Chicago streetlights. Tomorrow would bring chaos, but tonight they had truth, they had each other, and they had a plan. The game was changing, and Michael finally held cards his opponents didn't know about. He texted Catherine back, sorry, honey. Just having dinner with our son. We'll be home soon to hear his big news. The Art Institute's grand hall sparkled with Chicago's elite, their laughter echoing off marble walls as Catherine Reeves worked the room with practiced grace. Michael watched from the mezzanine as she touched arms, shared conspiratorial smiles, and wove through the crowd like a conductor leading an orchestra. After 25 years, he still found her beautiful. That was the cruelest part. She's good at this, James murmured beside him, his voice tight with emotion. Making everyone feel special, included. I always admired that about her. Michael squeezed his son's shoulder. They'd spent the morning implementing their plan, each piece falling into place with quiet precision. Now came the hardest part, the waiting. Michael. Marcus's voice carried across the gallery. There you are. We need to discuss those documents before the speeches. His smile was genuine, almost warm, and Michael wondered if this was how Marcus had always seen their relationship, a chess game where affection was just another move on the board. Of course. Michael nodded to James, who slipped away through the crowd. Your office or mine? Actually, Marcus gestured to a private gallery off the main hall. Let's have some privacy. The gallery was dim, Renaissance paintings watching their drama unfold like ancient witnesses. Marcus closed the door, his demeanor shifting. Mike, I know you've been stalling on those signatures. If this is about the Preston account. It's about James. Michael's words cut through the air like a blade. Marcus froze, his composure cracking for just a moment. What about James? I know he's your son. Michael watched the impact of those words hit Marcus like physical blows. I know about the bone marrow transplant, the medical records, all of it. Mike, For the first time, Marcus seemed genuinely shaken. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Catherine and I. We're in love. Michael's laugh was hollow. Is that what you told yourself while you watched me raise your child? While you planned to destroy my career? You don't understand. Marcus stepped closer, his voice urgent. Catherine was never happy with you. She felt trapped in a life she didn't choose. I gave her an escape. And the client accounts? The fraudulent transfers? Was that about love too? That was business. Marcus's face hardened. The market's changing. The old ways don't work anymore. We needed capital, and your clients have more than they'll ever use. No one gets hurt. Except me. Michael moved to the door. The man you frame for the theft. The father whose life you destroy. You were never his real father. Marcus's control finally snapped. You raised him because I couldn't. Because Catherine was too afraid to leave you, to damage your precious reputation. Do you know what that did to me? Watching another man raise my son. No, Michael's voice was quiet. But I know what it did to James. Having to discover the truth from medical records. Realizing his mother and biological father were willing to use him to commit fraud. The color drained from Marcus's face. What are you talking about? Check your phone. Marcus pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly as he read the messages flooding in. His eyes widened with each swipe. While we've been talking, Michael continued, the SEC has been receiving documentation of every fraudulent transfer you and Catherine planned. Every email, every altered record, every offshore account. James sent them himself. You're bluffing. But Marcus was already typing frantically on his phone. The son you tried to use as leverage. He's been working with federal investigators for weeks. Those mentoring conversations you had. All recorded. The real Preston account documents. Safe with my lawyers. A commotion erupted in the main hall. Through the gallery's glass doors, they could see men in suits approaching Catherine. Her perfect smile faltered as they showed their badges. You destroyed my family. Michael's voice cracked with genuine pain. You and Catherine played with lives like they were chess pieces. But you forgot something fundamental about parenthood, Marcus. It's not about DNA. It's about choice. Every day, I chose to be James's father. And today, he chose to stand with me. Marcus lunged forward, his face contorted with rage and fear. But before he could reach Michael, the gallery door opened. James stood there, flanked by federal agents. Marcus Sterling. One agent stepped forward. We need you to come with us. As they led Marcus away, Michael caught a glimpse of Catherine being escorted through the stunned crowd. Their eyes met across the gallery, and in that moment, he saw something he'd never seen before, fear. Not of arrest, not of scandal, but of losing the one thing she couldn't manipulate, her son's love. James moved to his father's side, their shoulders touching in silent support. Around them, the gala dissolved into chaos as Chicago's elite realized they were witnessing the fall of one of their own. Phones emerged, whispers spread, and reputations began to crumble. Dad? James's voice was soft. You okay? Michael looked at his son, this remarkable young man who'd chosen truth over comfort, integrity over biology. No, he admitted. But I will be. We both will be. His phone buzzed one last time. A message from David, there's more. You need to see this now. The night, it seemed, wasn't over yet. The private room at Gibson's was quiet, save for the gentle clink of ice in David's whiskey glass. Dawn was breaking over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of pearl and gold that seemed mockingly beautiful after the night's events. Michael sat across from his old friend, staring at the document spread between them. Catherine wasn't just moving money, David explained softly. She was protecting someone. Someone who's been hiding in plain sight all these years. The photographs showed a woman Michael hadn't seen in decades, Catherine's sister Claire, who had supposedly died in a car accident 20 years ago. But here she was, very much alive, living under an assumed name in Seattle. Bank records showed regular transfers, a parallel life funded by diverted client money. She was running from him, wasn't she? Michael's voice was hollow with realization. Their father. David nodded grimly. William Preston. The Preston account wasn't just our biggest client. He was Catherine's father, and what he did to those girls. He slid over a sealed envelope. Claire sent this to my office last week. She'd been watching the financial news, saw the merger announcements. She was afraid her father would find her through the account transfers. Michael's hands trembled as he read Claire's letter. The story it told was devastating, years of abuse hidden behind the Preston family's wealthy facade, Claire's desperate escape staged as a death, Catherine's silent complicity in protecting her sister while maintaining their father's business relationship with the firm. She never told me, Michael whispered. All these years, carrying this alone. She couldn't. James's voice came from the doorway. He looked exhausted, his tie loose around his neck. Mom told me everything at the police station. Grandfather Preston's condition for keeping Claire safe was that she marry someone he could control. Someone whose career he could influence. Me. The weight of understanding settled over Michael like a physical burden. He chose me because I was ambitious, hungry for success. Easy to manipulate. James sat beside his father, their shoulders touching. She said she did fall in love with you, Dad. That wasn't a lie. But the guilt of her sister, the years of deception. Marcus offered her a way out that didn't risk exposing Claire. And the fraud? David asked quietly. Preston was dying, James explained. He changed his will, started asking questions about old accounts. Mom and Marcus were desperate to move the money before he could trace it back to Claire. They never meant to hurt you, Dad. They just couldn't see another way. Michael thought of Catherine in their early years, her inexplicable tensions, the nights he'd wake to find her crying without explanation. How many times had she wanted to tell him? How many chances had he missed to be the safe harbor she needed? I've arranged for Catherine's release on bail, David said. The SEC is focusing on Marcus. With Claire's testimony about Preston's abuse and financial coercion, there's a chance. No. Michael stood, his decision crystallizing. No more hiding. No more secrets destroying lives. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number he'd memorized decades ago. William. It's Michael Reeves. We need to talk about your daughters. The next hour was a blur of calls, to Catherine's lawyers, to federal prosecutors, to Claire's security team in Seattle. With each conversation, Michael felt the weight of 25 years of secrets lifting, replaced by a different kind of burden, the responsibility of finally doing what should have been done long ago. Dawn had given way to full mourning when Catherine arrived. She stood in the doorway, her elegant gala dress replaced by borrowed clothes, her face bare of makeup and marked by tears. But her eyes, when they met Michael's, held something he'd never seen before, raw, unguarded truth. I thought I was protecting everyone, she whispered. Claire, you, James. But I only caused more pain. Michael crossed the room slowly, each step heavy with the ghosts of their shared past. You were a survivor doing what you had to do. But you're not alone anymore. You never were. James moved to his mother's side, taking her hand. In that gesture was forgiveness, understanding, and a love that transcended biology and betrayal. Catherine's composure finally broke, years of carefully maintained control dissolving into quiet sobs. "Preston's plane landed an hour ago," David announced from the doorway. "He's demanding a meeting." Catherine stiffened, old fears rising in her eyes. But Michael and James moved closer, flanking her like shields. "Let him come," Michael said softly. "It's time to end this. All of it." His phone buzzed with a text from Claire, "On my way. Don't let her face him alone." Outside, Chicago was awakening to what would become one of the biggest financial scandals in its history. But in that quiet room, something else was stirring, the first fragile tendrils of healing, of truth finally set free. The real war was about to begin, not for money or reputation, but for justice long denied. And this time, they would fight it together. William Preston's presence filled the conference room at Morton and Blake with a familiar suffocating weight. At 78, he still carried himself with the iron-rigid posture that had terrorized his daughter's childhood home, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his custom suit a armor of wealth and privilege. Catherine sat across from him, her hand gripped tightly in Michael's. The morning sun through the windows cast strange shadows across her face, highlighting both her fragility and her newfound strength. James stood behind his mother's chair, a silent guardian. "You disappoint me, Catherine." Preston's voice was soft, almost gentle, the tone that had always preceded his worst moments. "I gave you everything. Position, protection, a respectable marriage. And this is how you repay me." "You gave me chains," Catherine whispered, her voice gaining strength with each word. "You gave me silence and fear and the weight of knowing what you did to Claire. Claire is dead." Preston's mask slipped for just a moment, showing something dark beneath. "A tragic accident, as you well remember." "Hello, Father." Claire stood in the doorway, 20 years older than the young woman in the accident reports but unmistakably Catherine's sister. The same green eyes, the same quiet grace. Preston's face went ash-white. "You're looking well for a ghost," Claire said softly, moving to stand beside her sister. Her hand found Catherine's free one, completing a circle of protection around the conference table. "How dare you?" Preston started to rise, but Michael's voice cut through the air like steel. "Sit down, William." He placed a thick file on the table. "These are Claire's original medical records. The ones that document every accident, every clumsy fall. The ones your money couldn't make disappear. And these," James added, laying down another folder, "are the financial records. Every transaction, every shell company, every dollar you used to control and silence people. Including the judges who looked the other way." Preston's face twisted with rage. "You have no proof. We have everything." Catherine's voice trembled but held firm. "Claire kept records. All these years in hiding, she documented everything. And now the FBI has it all. You'd destroy your own family." Preston leaned forward, his voice dropping to that terrible gentle tone. "Your own father. You destroyed this family," Claire said quietly. "We're just finally letting the truth free." As if on cue, David entered with 2 FBI agents. "William Preston," one began, "you're under arrest for financial fraud, witness tampering, and conspiracy." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Preston lunged across the table, his hand reaching for Catherine's throat. But before anyone could move, James stepped forward, catching his grandfather's wrist in a grip that made the older man gasp. "Never again," James said softly, his eyes burning with protected fury. "You'll never hurt them again." As the agents led Preston away, his threats and curses fading down the hall, Catherine collapsed into Michael's arms, decades of tension finally breaking. Claire knelt beside her sister, their foreheads touching, tears mingling as they held each other for the first time in 20 years. Michael watched his wife and her sister, seeing for the first time the full measure of their courage. Every smile Catherine had forced, every normal day she had constructed, had been an act of defiance against the terror of her past. Her affair with Marcus, the financial schemes, they were misguided attempts to protect the only person she'd failed to save in childhood. "Dad?" James's voice was soft beside him. "What happens now?" Michael looked at his son, this remarkable young man who had helped bring truth to light, who had chosen love over biology, justice over ease. "Now we heal. Together." The next few months unfolded like a delicate dance of recovery. Catherine agreed to testify against Preston in exchange for leniency in the financial case. Claire's evidence, combined with Catherine's testimony, ensured their father would never again walk free. Marcus accepted a plea deal, his own childhood demons finally surfacing in therapy. The truth about James's parentage became public, but the press found a different story than they expected, not of scandal, but of a father's unwavering love and a son's moral courage. One evening, 6 months later, Michael found Catherine in their garden, tending to the roses she'd planted when they first moved in. The setting sun painted her silver-streaked hair with gold, and when she smiled at him, it was real, perhaps the first truly unguarded smile he'd seen in their entire marriage. "I keep waiting," she said softly, "for you to hate me. For the lies, for James, for everything." Michael sat beside her on the garden bench. "I grieved for the marriage I thought we had," he admitted. "But now I see the strength it took to survive, to protect Claire, to get up every morning and face the world. You're the bravest person I know." "I love you," she whispered, and for the first time in their marriage, there was no shadow behind the words. "I think I always did, even when I was too broken to show it right." From inside the house came the sound of laughter. James and Claire were cooking dinner, their weekly family tradition now. The smell of garlic and herbs drifted through the evening air, mingling with the scent of roses. "We start again," Michael said softly, taking her hand. "Not erasing the past, but building something new from its ashes. Together." Catherine leaned against him, her head finding that familiar spot on his shoulder. Above them, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, their light a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, there is always a path forward. Inside, James called them to dinner. As they walked hand in hand toward the warm light of their home, Michael realized that true love isn't about perfect beginnings or unbroken paths. It's about choosing each other, again and again, even when the truth hurts, even when the road is hard. It's about finding the light between broken things and nurturing it until it grows strong enough to illuminate the way home.